So just to continue on with this whole concept thing, like when you're actually doing some conceptualizing in itself or conceptualizations, you're having these type of concepts and things like that. There's actually a few ways to really approach the situation. So I just dropped a little quick video talking about how, you can be too conceptualized. So the way you can do this is if you're familiar with the automotive industry, a lot of times they come out with concept cars before they get put into production. Keep in mind concept cars. Just keep that in your mind as this video goes on. I'm going to try to make this brief. So, okay, there's two ways to look at the situation. Maybe that concept car or your idea that you're trying to present to the world is probably too much into its prototype stages. I mean, there's nothing wrong with being ahead of your time. Don't get me wrong. But don't get too far ahead, because then you'll start to feel like you're left behind, you know. I understand there's a time where you have to be in a class of your own. You don't feel like you want to compete with anybody. But at the same time, it's sometimes good to just show a lot of shock and awe. And this just goes with how you're conceptualizing things per se. Maybe your idea, you need to break down into increments, be incremental with your ideas that you're trying to put out to the world, that you're, let's say, trying to upload for YouTube. Or just when you're talking to people, when you're doing business, sometimes you got to break things down. Let's say, yeah, you're trying to get acquainted with someone that you really have an interest in on a romantic level, per se. Sometimes you got to break things down for people, A lot of times yours truly likes to hit a woman with the wham wham before I hit her with the bam bam, meaning like, sometimes I hit her with some like big ideas, and she'd be like, dang, I ain't never heard of that before. Because that's the idea. I want to talk to you in ways you haven't heard a man talk to you before. But then I can break it down to you so that you know that I'm making sense by what I'm saying, and you can get it, and then you'll be like, oh wow, word up, ooh, babe, I like that, I like that. So especially for the woman that's very sapiosexual per se. But yeah, you continue to break things down into increments. That's one way of approaching a concept. The other way is just realizing that concept is just too much. You got to start from scratch. So a lot of times you see with prototype cars, some of them don't make it into production because, let's face it, a lot of the ideas that are on that car just ain't going to work. So sometimes some ideas have to be scrapped. Some concept cars were scrapped. But nevertheless, let's say if this concept car had any shine of hope, that car may go into production just the way it is, just because it's such a raw idea. But other times, maybe that car was too conceptualized, and maybe there was still some ideas about it that could work, but just break it down into increments. Let it trickle down to other cars that are going to be into production. That trickling down effect. And so I just had to do that recently, just with this whole idea that there's something beyond the Dom game, and it's called what I like to call the mastery. You know what I'm saying? You got the Dom game, and then you got what yours truly just coined, the mastery. Because I'm a mastermind. I'm not a Dom. I'm a master. You know what I'm saying? So I sit above the Dom. As far as the way I look at the world, the way that I approach women, and a lot of things like that. So let's round this up. Let's talk about some things. But yeah, before I get to that, let me break down what I meant by the whole being beyond Dom and all that stuff. Now, I had to break that down to people, and I had to do that with a video that I had titled Beyond Dom Game. Originally, it was titled Autonomous Relationships Beyond Dom Game. So that in itself just told you I had to break down my title even more. And I had to break down within the video the idea of that there was something beyond Dom game. Because if I just threw it out there that there's something beyond Dom game and there's this thing called Mastermind or Mastery, people would be like, okay, what are you talking about? So, and it's only because I know from experience what I'm talking about. So I should be able to break this down into plain English for a lot of people to understand. So, like I said, you become too conceptualized if you cannot break your idea down to where people can understand. A lot of times, the greatest inventions are those that are the simplest. Like they say, necessity was the birth of all inventions. So when you have ideas that aren't of necessity, they are probably too much of a concept and should be left as that, right? So I wanted to wrap it up with this idea that, just speaking on women, again, you may have had an idea of what you thought was the right woman, bro. You might have had a certain idea of a certain woman that you had in mind. But you grew up, you started to have experiences, you started to come into your own, you started to mature, you started to realize, man, I got to go back to the drawing board on this one, man. Women are different these days. It ain't like it used to be, or maybe my mind ain't the way it used to be. I think differently about women these days. You know what I'm saying? I think a lot of different things now about women these days. So you start to kind of finely tune your ideas to where it's more practical, to where it makes more sense, to where what you thought was ideal about a woman before has changed because you have adapted with the times. You have adopted some things too. So that's just one instance of what I'm saying. Don't be too conceptualized with the type of woman that should be in your life. Bingo. So, in all this to say, just to kind of do a side note for y'all, a lot of my mastermind style videos, I'll just break down in small pieces, but then over at my actual mastermind channel, I'll break it down even more. And, I like to also put scripture into a lot of things that I say. So I'd rather reserve all of that for the mastermind channel itself. So I'll always drop little small jewels here, but if you want the fullness of what I have to say, go check out Mastermind, that channel over there. I always have a link to that channel below every video that I do in the description section. Still a small channel. It's not growing a lot yet, but hey, every seed has to be planted first, right? So I'll be dropping some major videos over there very soon, to kind of tie in this whole mastermind thing. But just treat this video as just a little gem.